February 9th, 2004. A college student crashes her car on a dark road in New Hampshire. In the 7 minutes between witnesses calling police and a first officer arriving on the scene, Maura Murray vanishes into thin air. For 20 years, this case has haunted investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike. But now, a single fingerprint might change everything. As first reported by investigative journalist James Renner, this breakthrough could finally crack one of America's most baffling cold cases. Hey everyone, welcome to Bad Things. In today's episode, we're diving deep into a breaking development in the Maura Murray case. We'll examine newly revealed evidence linking a former West Point cadet to her disappearance, explore his disturbing criminal history, and uncover the connections that make him the New Hampshire State Police's #1 suspect. What we're about to discuss could finally help solve one of America's most baffling disappearances. A breakthrough has emerged in the Maura Murray investigation, and it's one that could finally help solve this 20-year mystery. A fingerprint found inside Maura's Saturn has been matched to former West Point cadet Steffen Baldwin. But here's where things get interesting. This discovery came as Baldwin was being sentenced to 15.5 years in prison for an entirely different set of crimes in Ohio. The connection was made when Baldwin's prints were entered into AFIS, the National Fingerprint Database. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit got the hit they'd been waiting for. This wasn't just any match. This was physical evidence linking someone from Maura's past directly to her car. For investigators who've worked this case for 2 decades, this was the kind of breakthrough they'd been hoping for. Detective Charles West of the New Hampshire State Police identified Baldwin as his #1 suspect. In fact, West was so convinced of Baldwin's potential involvement that he was making plans to interview him in Ohio when he suddenly left the cold case unit. The significance of this can't be overstated. We have a lead investigator who believed so strongly in this connection that he was ready to cross state lines to pursue it. What makes this even more compelling is the timing. The fingerprint match didn't just give investigators a new suspect. It gave them a suspect whose recent criminal history reveals a disturbing pattern of behavior. We're talking about someone who's been proven to be a master manipulator, someone who's shown a repeated pattern of deception and fraud. The FBI has already gotten involved, conducting interviews and gathering evidence. This isn't just another lead or another theory. This is physical evidence connecting someone from Maura's past directly to her vehicle. Someone who knew her personally, someone who had a relationship with her at West Point, someone who left West Point within days of when Maura withdrew. But to understand why this breakthrough is so significant, we need to look at who Steffen Baldwin really is and his disturbing connection to Maura Murray. Who is Steffen Baldwin? To understand why this fingerprint is so significant, we need to look at who Steffen Baldwin really is. And what investigators have discovered about his past paints a disturbing picture of manipulation, deception, and calculated behavior. Let's start with his connection to Maura. Back at West Point, Baldwin wasn't just another cadet. He was someone deeply involved in Maura's life. They dated for a period before she met Bill Roche, and their relationship was serious enough that Baldwin got into trouble for having Maura in his room, breaking West Point's strict rules about male and female cadets sharing space. But Baldwin's connection went beyond just dating. He served as Maura's representative during her Judicial Review Board hearing at West Point. He was there when she faced discipline after being found passed out on the lawn from alcohol poisoning. According to Baldwin, her friends had abandoned her there to avoid getting in trouble themselves. Here's where things get interesting. When Maura withdrew from West Point, Baldwin left within a week of her departure. This timing raised red flags for investigators, especially given what we now know about his behavior patterns. Fast forward to 2012, when Baldwin's true nature began to emerge. He was appointed as a humane agent for Union County, Ohio, a rural area outside Columbus. He created what appeared to be a legitimate non-profit called the Animal Cruelty Task Force, complete with official badges and legal authority. He positioned himself as someone dedicated to helping troubled animals, particularly dogs with behavioral issues that were at risk of being put down. But beneath this facade of legitimacy lay something much darker. Baldwin was running an elaborate scheme. He would take in these troubled dogs, promise to rehabilitate them, and collect money from desperate owners. But instead of helping these animals, he would euthanize them when their funding ran out, all while telling the owners their pets were doing well and had been adopted. During his recent sentencing, victim after victim described Baldwin as a master manipulator and a compulsive liar. One victim stated he conned every human into believing him. Another described him as someone who could make other people believe whatever he wanted them to believe. A veterinarian who worked with him testified that he is someone who has no empathy, no ability to care for others. When investigators finally caught up with him, they discovered he had needlessly euthanized at least 18 dogs in Ohio, possibly as many as 100 cats, and had fled to California where he started the same scheme again. This pattern of deception, manipulation, and ability to maintain elaborate lies while presenting a trustworthy facade is exactly what makes investigators take his potential connection to Maura's case so seriously. The deeper connection. But here's where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. Years ago, during the initial investigation, there were rumors circulating on message boards about someone named Stefanos or Stefan S. These rumors, which seemed baseless at the time, centered around a UMass party that Maura attended the weekend before she disappeared. We know from phone records that Maura's boyfriend, Bill Roche, accessed her voicemail after she vanished. What he discovered was disturbing. Maura had apparently hooked up with someone at that UMass party. And now, 20 years later, these old rumors about Stefan take on new significance. When confronted by investigators, Baldwin's response was calculated. He sent an email to the FBI that, on the surface, appears helpful. But look closer and you'll see classic manipulation tactics at work. He deflects attention to other potential suspects, including what he calls a fifth-year senior who allegedly stalked Maura at West Point. He portrays himself as cooperative, while simultaneously distancing himself from any involvement. The email is particularly interesting because of how Baldwin frames himself, as someone who cared for Maura and was supposedly concerned about her well-being. He even suggests investigating her boyfriend's friend group, claiming they once left her passed out drunk on a lawn. But remember, this is coming from someone who has demonstrated a pattern of masterful manipulation. The veterinarian who worked with Baldwin in Ohio put it best when she testified, he is someone who has no empathy, no ability to care for others. Another victim stated, he could make other people believe whatever he wanted them to believe. This is exactly what makes investigators so concerned about his potential connection to Maura's case. His ability to appear genuine while hiding darker truths. But perhaps most troubling is the timing of it all. Baldwin left West Point within days of Maura's withdrawal, and now his fingerprint shows up in her car, despite his claim that he never saw her after West Point and has never been further north than Connecticut. The investigation now. The discovery of Baldwin's fingerprint has completely shifted the focus of the investigation. But what makes this lead different from all the others that have come and gone over the past 2 decades? First, we have physical evidence, something that's been notably absent in this case. While Baldwin claims his print was on a CD from trading music at West Point, investigators are skeptical. The location and condition of the print suggest more recent contact with the vehicle. And remember, this is coming from someone who insists he's never been further north than Connecticut. Second, we have a suspect whose behavioral patterns match aspects of the case that have always puzzled investigators. The calculated nature of Maura's disappearance, the emails to professors, the packed car, the apparent plan, all suggest someone who knew how to think steps ahead. Baldwin's criminal history shows exactly that kind of methodical planning. The FBI's involvement is particularly telling. They've conducted multiple interviews with Baldwin, and sources close to the investigation say they're especially interested in his whereabouts during February 2004. His phone records from that time period are being carefully scrutinized, along with any potential connections to the UMass area. What's particularly interesting is how Baldwin's story has evolved. In his initial email to investigators, he claimed he never looked into Maura's case too much because of that little twinge of disappointment in how the relationship ended. But cell phone records show he was actively following the case online, even creating multiple accounts on discussion forums about Maura's disappearance. The New Hampshire State Police are now reviewing old evidence with fresh eyes. They're particularly interested in any surveillance footage from the days leading up to Maura's disappearance, hoping to spot Baldwin's vehicle in the area. They're also re-interviewing witnesses who might have seen someone matching his description. Most importantly, they're looking at this case through the lens of what we now know about Baldwin's methods, his ability to maintain elaborate deceptions, his skill at manipulation, and his pattern of appearing helpful while actively working to mislead. Where do we go from here? As this investigation continues to unfold, there are several crucial aspects that investigators and the public need to consider. First, there's the matter of Baldwin's current situation. He's now serving a 15-and-a-half-year sentence in Ohio, which actually works in investigators' favor. They know exactly where he is, and more importantly, they have time to build their case. People serving long sentences often become more willing to talk, especially as the reality of their situation sets in. Second, there's the matter of potential witnesses who might now feel safe to come forward. With Baldwin behind bars, people who may have been afraid to speak up before might finally share what they know. This is particularly relevant for anyone who was at UMass during that time period, or anyone who might have information about Baldwin's movements in early 2004. The case has also caught the attention of behavioral analysts at the FBI. They're particularly interested in the parallels between Baldwin's documented criminal behavior and certain aspects of Maura's disappearance. The methodical planning, the elaborate deceptions, the ability to maintain false narratives. These are all hallmarks of Baldwin's later crimes that might have been present even in 2004. However, we must acknowledge something important. While this lead seems promising, we've seen seemingly solid leads fade away before. Baldwin's fingerprint could have an innocent explanation, just as he claims. His history of manipulation and deception doesn't automatically connect him to Maura's disappearance. Like every lead in this case, we have to approach it with both hope and skepticism. But for Maura's family, this development has given them something they haven't had in years. Hope. Real, tangible hope based on physical evidence, not just theories or speculation. For the first time in 20 years, they have a direct connection between their daughter's disappearance and someone who knew her personally. The fingerprint in Maura's car might just be the beginning, or it might be another dead end. As investigators continue to dig deeper into Baldwin's past, as more witnesses come forward, and as the FBI continues its investigation, we might finally be getting closer to answering the question that has haunted us for 2 decades. What really happened to Maura Murray on that cold February night in 2004?